For this video, we're going to look at the Griptape Nodes Foundry Nuke library. What we'll do is create a workflow inside of Griptape Nodes, publish it, and then use it as a gizmo inside of Nuke. To get started, it's quite a quick install. You can follow the instructions here. So inside of Griptape Nodes, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of nodes first. I'll look at my libraries, and I'm looking for the Nuke start flow. And I'm also going to be creating a Nuke end flow. Now, everything that is between these two nodes is what will be contributing to our gizmo. For this example, I'm going to be using Flux Fill. I have an API token for this particular model, and I want to use this because of the masked input. So how this setup works is whatever is plugged into our Nuke start flow node will show up in our gizmo under the Inputs tab. This is something we want to have access to. I'll put the input image as well as the image mask. And this way I can also load these items off of disk if I need to. And then I'm going to also input the prompt. Now on the Nuke end flow, this is the media that we want to output and will show up in the output tab. So what I want to get out of this is the filled image. I'm going to add that as a parameter. Now on the Flux node itself, I'm just going to change the output format to PNG, and then we'll leave it at that. So I'm going to name this workflow. Just call this Flux Fill. And then I want to save the workflow. Those were the workflow details. Now I just need to quickly save the workflow because that's going to be necessary before we publish the gizmo. Now that we have our setup, I'm going to publish the workflow. I'm going to choose the Nuke Nodes library. I'm going to name this Flux Fill. I'll install this into Nuke 17. And this is my gizmo install path. So I'll publish this, and now we can launch Nuke. Now we're in Nuke, and we have our plate. And what we're going to do is just add some old vines or some vines to this background building here. Now we can pull in our gizmo. If we right-click, you'll notice that we have a new Griptape entry, and there is our gizmo. Or we can build it from the tab menu. All right, our plate is going to go into input 1. And then we need a mask here. So for this, just going to build a roto node. And then we're going to begin to create our mask. So we'll just grab this area here. Could be loose for this pass. Okay, so we'll plug it into input 2. Now let's examine the gizmo. We have the opportunity to change the output directory versus the default where it'll be saved. This is also where we're going to run our workflow from. On the input tabs are the parameters that we exposed in the gizmo by plugging them into the Nuke start flow. And on the output are the parameters we plugged into the Nuke end flow, which was the output from Flux Fill. For the input prompt, let's do something simple. Add vines to building. And then we'll run the workflow. Now we have a warning, and this is because Flux Fill wants an RGB image, not just an alpha channel. So I'll switch our roto node over to RGB, and then we'll go ahead and run the workflow. Now the first time you run the workflow, it takes a bit longer as it's setting up the environment, but all the subsequent runs will be quicker. Workflow completed successfully. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results. All right, definitely added the vines. Not exactly what we're looking for, but it also did change the building up quite a bit. Now, as far as the details go, maybe I don't mind that. Maybe I do. Maybe it's important. But maybe I want to keep the structure intact. So let's make a modification to our Griptape Nodes workflow, and then we'll republish the gizmo. Back in Griptape Nodes, I'm now going to modify the gizmo itself. The first thing I want to do is actually expose another parameter, and that parameter is guidance scale. I want to have some flexibility of this parameter inside of Nuke. Now, what guidance scale is for Flux Fill is how strict the model is going to follow the prompt versus how naturally it blends with the surrounding image with a little more freedom. So a higher value is going to lock it tightly to the prompt, but it can also make the fill look a little bit more rigid and artificial at the edges. and then a lower value is going to give the model more freedom to blend in with the surrounding area. The default is 30. So from there, we're most likely going to be lowering it, and that's going to make much more sense for VFX work. Okay, so that was one additional parameter. Now, another thing we want to do is to have our prompts be more intelligent. So I'm going to make an agent node. And for the agent node, we're going to plug our prompt from our expose parameter into the prompt of the agent. And then the output of the agent, we're going to be plugging into the prompt for Flux Fill. This way, the agent is going to take our very simple prompt and turn it into something that will work much better with Flux. Now what we can do is define the behavior of this agent. And I'm going to create a rule set for this. Now, for this rule set, we're going to give it some instructions on how this agent should behave. Now, I have some prepped here and using another LLM to get the instructions. And essentially what we're doing is defining the behavior for this agent. You can see here, you're an expert prompt engineer for Flux Fill, and your job is to take the user description and then change it. And these are the rules that are going to apply to it. So from here, we're going to take that rule set and plug it into the rule set input. And then another thing we can do is change our prompt model. Now, I also have an API key token for Claude, so I'm going to be using Claude Sonnet 4.6. And then we're going to want to give this a try. Let's go ahead and we'll match what we're using inside of Nuke. So add vines to building. Now we can go ahead and run this inside of Griptape nodes and see what kind of output we get. So much better than our simple prompt because it's now an expert prompt engineer for Flux Fill. So we can see words like lush, green, ivy vines cascading naturally down. That's great. Now, I want to be able to monitor this output because right now we won't actually see what it comes up with inside of Nuke. So for this, I will take the output and then also plug this into the Nuke end flow this time. So this way we'll be able to see the actual result under the output tab. I'm going to clear the prompt. I don't want any pre-prompts for this. And now I'm going to save this workflow. And then let's publish it. I'm going to call this the same thing, except this time we don't want to update our current version. I'm going to publish this to a new version. So version 2, and then update. Now back in Nuke, if we either update our plugins or we restart Nuke, we're going to right click and under our Griptape menu, we have Flux Fill. But also we have a sub menu now for version 1 and version 2. So we're going to use version 2, and our plate goes into input 1, and then our mask goes into input 2. But now here's the thing. We can actually define our mask a bit better because I really want to preserve the windows and more of the structure. I don't want them to get messed up. I don't want to have different types of windows showing up. And because the initial roto shape I'm giving is very wide, I'm leaving too much room for interpretation. So we can define this just by defining our roto shape a bit better. So in this case, we have our shape, and then we have the windows that we're going to be subtracting from our initial shape. This way we won't have any generation on top of our windows. All right, so now we can plug that into Flux Fill. Now under the input tab, we see that we have our guidance scale. So remember, in this situation, the lower number will be better as we'll be able to have better interpretation around the edges and blending into the surrounding environment. So I'm going to put it down to 10. And for the prompt, we're going to do that same simple prompt. And if we quickly have a look at our output tab, we can see that we have the output from the agent as well. So we can take a look at that. Now let's go ahead and run this workflow and see our result. The workflow is completed and we can have a look, and it is much better. The agent did a much better job of getting us those lush vines inside of this area, and that's exactly what I was looking for. The windows are preserved, So I think we are okay for this example, and I'm going to be able to use this gizmo later on for other workflows. From here, I can continue to comp and cut this piece out with the vines, place it back on top of the original plate, do any additional tracking or compositing work that I need to get done on it. But for now, I've created an element for that background piece. This is just one simple example of what's possible when you connect Griptape nodes to Nuke. We published a workflow as a gizmo, wired it directly into comp, and ran a model. With the agent layer, the AI isn't just generating, it's reasoning about what is being generated. What's great about this approach is that the workflow setup can be as simple like we just did, or it can be as complex as needed. Our example today was straightforward, but the graph can be significantly more involved. It still publishes the same way, still sits in your node graph the same way, and the artist experience is identical.